I solemnly swear that I am up to no good.
Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot and Prongs are proud to present the Marauder's Map.
If you succeed tonight, more than one innocent life may be spared.
Expecto Patronum!
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We're doing chapter 21, Hermione's Secret.
So secretive.
We have Elizabeth back with us.
Hi everyone.
And before we get into the chapter, I wanted to send a quick shout out to the Restricted Section podcast. They were kind enough to have me on recently, talking some Order of the Phoenix.
Oh, it's my favorite book.
It's mine too, which is why they wanted me on. So I'll be talking about Chapter 3, The Advanced Guard, which is a really cool chapter. This is a non-spoiler section of here, so I won't get into what we talked about, but check out the Restricted Section podcast. They're really cool. Thank you to Christina, the host, for having me on. Go check it out.
Yeah.
So, we've had a couple of really short chapters toward the end of this book.
And then we get to this one.
Which I believe is almost 30 pages long, somewhere in that roundabout.
Yeah, it's pretty thick.
It's a pretty long chapter. The last chapter we had was like 8 pages. So this is definitely an expanded, but there's a lot that we get to. So, really quick, just to run down this chapter, we start out with Snape and Fudge having a conversation, and then Albus comes in, kind of clears the room a little bit, talks with Harry and Hermione privately. He gives them quite a discussion. Quite the monologue, really. It's just him talking.
And a vague one at that for them.
Yeah.
As per usual.
So Albus does his thing. Albus being Albus, does his thing. And then we get into the Time Turner section of this whole chapter, which is really what this story kind of revolves around.
Is that her secret?
Maybe. We'll find out. And, so there's a lot of shenanigans involving Time Turners here, and there's a lot of action that ensues. And then we finally end up with Sirius Black escaping from his cell, otherwise known as Flitwick's office. So, going back to the kind of the beginning of the chapter, I loved the interaction between Snape and Fudge when they believe they're having a private conversation between the two of them just outside of the hospital wing.
Oh, I love that, them overhearing being talked about. Especially since Snape is not his normal nasty self.
No, he's talking, he's really responding a lot to what Fudge is saying. I feel like Fudge is leading the conversation.
Yeah.
Just gushing over Snape and the job that he's done here. And talking about possibly getting an Order of Merlin second class, or if Fudge can swing it, because he's the Minister of Magic, of course he could if he wanted to, get him the first class Order of Merlin.
Makes you wonder, what constitutes getting an Order of Merlin, you know?
I think you have to be, it's almost a nomination process. Like, someone has to nominate you for it, and then it's almost like they check it. Like, they check what makes you worthy, and then that's kind of how it goes. It seems like a very informal thing.
Yeah, if you could just nominate. Though I suppose he's the Minister of Magic, so maybe it's his role.
I imagine if he wants to get it done, he gets it done.
Yeah. I just really love how it's okay, yes, obviously he's also okay, Harry Potter, we should be treating him like a normal person, and he would be in hardcore trouble for this. But there's also, he lets it known that, okay, maybe they weren't in their entire senses. They could have had a confundus charm on them, judging by the behavior that they did, which made zero sense, next to a supposed murderer. So it's kind of nice. It's yes, I hate these children, but I'm still going to give them the benefit of the doubt. That just struck me as interesting about Snape.
It wasn't. I had the same note about him kind of going to bat for why the three did what they did.
Yeah.
Even when they attacked him.
Yeah.
Which seems like a very non-Snape path to take.
It seems very protective teacher mode.
A little bit. I think it goes back to what we've talked about before in regards to Snape and that whole Shrieking Shack scene of him coming in believing he truly was is the hero of that whole scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I know you had some thoughts on the whole Snape interaction in the Shrieking Shack, but I believe they're spoilers, so we'll
we'll have to get to that later.
We'll get a little bit more into his kind of reaction to everything.
I just had thoughts spurred by your discussion with Molly, so...
Yeah, well, I'm ready for him, because I think that was a really cool discussion that we had around Snape's motivations, which I don't think many people really... Yeah. I don't think many people really kind of think about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
I think both of us talked about Madame Pomfrey for a second. I just love her shoving chocolate in Harry's mouth. Just be like, shut up, child, and get your medicine, and just let the grown-ups deal with the situation, because you're my patient.
Well, in regards to Madame Pomfrey, first of all, just to kind of tail back on Snape for just a second, we find out from Snape that he conjured stretchers.
Yeah.
To kind of get them all back, which is a much safer way.
Wish you could do
that. Yes, I do wish I could do that. But, Sirius and Lupin do not exactly do that for Snape.
No.
But Snape does do it for Sirius. He puts him on a stretcher. He doesn't randomly float him, hitting him on every single branch, which he could do at that point in time. No one would stop him.
He'd be kind of justified in some ways.
In some ways he would be. But that's kind of an interesting take, too. He actually conjured stretchers for the three of them. For Ron,
for his childhood bullies.
For all four of them. For Ron, Hermione, Harry, and Sirius. He conjured stretchers for them.
Yeah.
But then, yes, brings him back to Madame Pomfrey, who is a little on edge.
It's like an invasion of the hospital wing. There's Snape there, there's, the Minister of Magic, and Professor Dumbledore, and it's just like, I want to take care of my children who have gone through a very traumatic thing, and are obviously hurt and need chocolate.
I do kind of feel bad for Madame Pomfrey, because I do know what it's like when you're trying to establish care for a patient and you have people hovering over you, seemingly doing the exact opposite of what that patient needs.
You mean your parents and random
people in your office, coaches and administrators, everybody, everybody, other students, like the whole bit. So I do feel bad for Madame Pomfrey. There is a larger picture here, which we get the entrance of Albus Dumbledore, who clears the scene pretty effectively, I think. Yeah,
it just boggles my mind. I know it's like it's his domain being Hogwarts, but the fact that he can just order the Minister of Magic to leave is insane to me.
His presence just carries a lot of weight.
Yeah.
So it's like, if Dumbledore says something, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, yes, I think both of us noticed that he kind of just came in and took charge of the situation very effectively, very efficiently. Despite Madame Pomfrey's objections and her passive-aggressiveness slamming of the door behind her.
And Snape trying to be like, are you kidding me?
Which,
really?
I also want to get back to that in the spoiler section. Yeah, we have a lot of Snape in the spoiler section, but that's okay. Anyway, so as soon as Fudge, Snape, and Pomfrey make their exits, Harry and Hermione just go off in this rant, if you will, to Dumbledore, which I can only imagine Dumbledore's like rolling his eyes at and being like, children.
See, I don't feel like he'd be rolling his eyes. I think he'd just be like, look, I know I'm finally the first person who's listening to you, but we don't have time for this. So you just gotta let me talk and you guys shush.
Yeah. In part of that rant, Harry says that Peter attacked Ron. When exactly did Peter attack Ron?
As a rat, he
was biting and scratching. But I feel like Harry's trying to paint the picture of the broken leg was Peter. Like, the most damage done to Ron was actually done by Sirius.
Right.
Unless he's passively putting it on Peter and being like, because Peter exists, all of this happened to Ron. But
maybe because he emotionally attacked him since he's been sleeping in his bed secretly this whole time.
Since they've been sleeping together?
Yeah.
It's disturbing. On so many levels. Anyway, I just took note of that. I was like, wait, when exactly did Peter attack Ron? But whatever. Albus finally hushes them. And is like, can I speak?
And he has a lot to say. When
He has a lot to say. I think you have it marked here what the first bit he says is.
The very first bit?
Yep.
It is your turn to listen, and I beg you will not interrupt me, because there is very little time. There is not a shred of proof to support Black's story except your word, and the word of 2 13-year-old wizards will not convince anybody. A street full of eyewitnesses swore they saw Sirius murder Pettigrew. I myself gave evidence to the ministry that Sirius had been the Potter's secret keeper.
I like a lot of what was said there, especially the note of, I myself gave evidence.
Yeah. Because it shows that, like, he can also be manipulated and tricked.
Well, to his knowledge, which I think is the whole thing. Like, Snape, we talked about, thinks he's right.
Right.
Everything he knows points to him being correct here. That's what Dumbledore's admitting to as well. Like, everything.
I mean, because that's been fact for the past 13 years.
Right. And if even Dumbledore can say, like, whoa, I thought this was the case too.
Right. I was wrong.
And I was wrong. Which is not a thing he really probably utters all that often.
And I also like the fact that he's like, listen, 2 13-year-old, like, your opinion is not going to persuade any adult, which is an unfortunate reality. Like, most adults will not take a teenager seriously.
Well, especially when you have, we just said, Dumbledore came into a room and told the Minister of Magic to get out.
Right.
If he himself gave evidence to the contrary, 2
2
13-year-old wizards are not going to overrule Dumbledore.
Right.
Who just told the Minister of Magic to leave.
Right.
So, and then he
talks about how Professor Lupin is in the forest and people do not trust werewolves. So even if his, testimony were to come out, no one's going to believe him. No one's going to listen to him, especially since he and Sirius were friends. There's just no trust there.
Well, now the news is out. The news is out that he's a werewolf because Fudge is here. Right. So now it is a known thing that Lupin is a werewolf.
Right.
So so the Lupin idea is completely out of the realm of possibility.
And he kind of rounds it up saying, like, I have no power to make other men see the truth or to overrule the Minister of Magic. And Harry is just like, feels like all the oxygen's just been, the floor has been pulled out from underneath his feet. Like, Dumbledore can solve anything, and he can't solve this.
And then he comes in with what I think is just a great line. It's subtle. And I love the way it's worded because he, like, shifts his gaze over to Hermione.
Right.
And speaks directly to Hermione here and is like, what we need is more time. And Hermione's like, wait, what? Oh.
Right. Which, once again, Hermione being the first one to actually understand what's going on with anything.
Took her literally a second, but she figured it out.
I love this. Okay, I love his next little instructions, too, because in typical Dumbledore fashion, they're not the most clear, and yet these are possibly the most specific ones he's ever given. Said, Sirius is locked in Professor Flitwick's office on the 7th floor, 13th window from the right of the West Tower. If all goes well, you will be able to save more than one innocent life tonight. But remember this, both of you, you must not be seen. Miss Granger, you know the law. You know what is at stake. You must not be seen. And Harry's just like, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, I like the whole 7th floor, 13th window from the right.
Yeah.
Very specific.
And very quick. I mean, if you're Harry, you have no idea what's going on. So you're going to remember these numbers?
You're banking on Hermione.
100%.
You're banking on Hermione 100%, for sure. Yeah, it's very specific. And from that point on, it's basically Hermione figuring out the steps that are needed going forward. And then Dumbledore just...
Yeah, he said 3 turns. It's 5 minutes to midnight. 3 turns should do it. Good luck. And then sends him out, locks the door, and Hermione's like, mission mode. And Harry's just like, I have no idea what's going on.
No idea what's going on. I do find it interesting. So we get into the time turner portion of this.
I love the time turner so much.
So
can we just pause for a second and talk about how fantastic the time turner is as a magical item? Because you guys, it is okay. It's my second favorite magical item. It's one of the things I remember the first time I read this, I was like, I'm so jealous of Hermione. I want one. And literally for the exact same reason. I want to be able to redo hours so I can just get stuff done. I feel like there's never enough time in the day to get everything done.
That is dependent on you being motivated enough once you turn the time back to actually get stuff done and just not have another hour to just sit and like.
I mean, I would probably also do an hour of like a nap or two, but I would totally use it. I'm a teacher and I have so much work, and especially these days, I'm starting in a brand new school district, so I feel like I'm just drowning right now. So if I had a time turner, that would be a tremendous help.
Hey, I feel that. I've had a couple of very busy weeks at the high school myself. I'm not a teacher, but I do work at a high school. And yes, I could use an extra hour or two to do setup, to watch the events that I need to watch, all these things.
Oh, it'd be such a lifesaver.
It really would help out.
I did find it interesting, though. 3 turns. A turn is an hour. That must explain why wizards don't tend to go back years. You know?
Yes, it would be a little bit difficult, and to keep track, because you can't. It's not like you could just flip the thing and let it spin a couple of times. You really need to keep track of how long you're going.
And imagine if you lost count.
Right? Here's my issue with the time thing, and this is completely irrelevant to the actual plot and storyline, but it's just a quirk of me. So I get they're in arguably the Highlands of Scotland, right? They're very far north. Mm-hmm. I understand that. But let me just set the scene here. Mm-hmm. They're 5 minutes to midnight. You go back 3 turns, 3 hours. You're at 9:55 p.m. You go outside, still sun shining brightly at 9:55 p.m. If anybody's listening from Scotland, is this true in early June? Are you still having, like, sunshine after 10 p.m., like, still up above the tree line?
Yeah, because here in Chicago, we are not.
No, not even, like, towards the solstice. So, like, we're not even that, like, that's crazy. Anyway, that was just me. So they have some sunlight to play with for a little while before the sun sets.
But first, there's the whole, like, let's catch Harry up conversation. It's a time turner. She got it from Professor McGonagall. She's using it to go back and redo hours of her lessons.
It's not just a time turner, though. It's a teleporter, apparently. Because they went from the hospital wing to the entrance hall. They teleported.
I wonder if you have to, like, tell yourself where you're going to be before you do it.
I think it has something to do with where you were at that time. Because literally seconds after they teleported.
Yeah, that would explain why she dragged him into the closet so quickly, because she knew they were going to be there in like 5 seconds.
So maybe there's some inherent,
buy that. Yeah.
Maybe there's some inherent magic in the time turner where it puts you in that time you want to be, but gives you enough time to miss your previous self.
Yeah, that's really poorly designed. If like so many meddling with time leads to death and destruction, why have it send you back to where you were?
Exactly. So maybe there's some inherent magic where they're like, I know you want 9:55, but let's do 9:54 just to make sure we get you
I've
out.
always read it as like she pulled him into the closet because she's so paranoid about being seen. But yeah, that would make sense of we could see ourselves, and we're invisible, so we can't even see ourselves seeing ourselves.
Right. Right. So, I mean, because they get in the closet and then like seconds later, the trio walks by under the cloak.
Once again, though, I know I brought this up like towards the beginning of the book when we were discussing this, but I still think McGonagall should have known better about giving this time turner to Hermione. Yes, she's been using it, for her studies and whatever, but it has done such damage to her. She is so stressed out, and just seeing her like in the actual time travel mode and how careful they have to be about potentially running into anybody, like that stress alone, even if you didn't have all the studies to do, that stress alone would be
truthfully
so hard.
This is relatively easy. When you're doing this to get to classes, there's students
everywhere.
And
every single person is a potential witness who could have just ran into you 5 seconds ago.
When you're going in and out of the common room with this, that's a lot of potential hiccups and issues. So this is probably a piece of cake for Hermione,
I feel
other than the added stress.
I feel like McGonagall should have given her a classroom that was specifically for her to use as like a time travel study room or something.
Before we get too far away from it, we should note, I don't believe we've said specifically yet, but Dumbledore did make mention that if all goes well, more than one innocent life shall be saved tonight.
Right, which Hermione does not know what that means.
Hermione doesn't know, and this is like the one time where Harry picks up on things quick after Hermione like explains what exactly is going on.
Yeah, like we are in the past now. It's now our present.
Harry ends up picking up on the two will be saved tonight line pretty quickly.
So who are we saving?
We're saving Buckbeak.
Yay.
So they have gone back in time far enough. Obviously, the trio under the cloak is going out to Hagrid's to console him before this event.
Which, again, this is so hard because they're invisible. So, yes, I mean, they have some recollection of where they were walking, but they weren't paying attention to where they were walking. And now they do have to be aware of where their invisible selves are so that their future selves don't be seen. It's just so intense.
Yeah, so they take a roundabout way, and they describe the way, but they take a roundabout way to get to the back door of Hagrid's from the Forbidden Forest, and they kind of skulk in the edge of the forest.
And it takes so much planning and thinking. I mean, you have to be aware of what your past self did and what other people who are in their present could potentially do. I mean, God forbid someone just comes out of like the greenhouse or something is like, hey, what are you guys doing here? Come see my new plant. Like, oh, like everything can throw you off.
We can't. We're going to the Forbidden Forest. That's
right.
forbidden.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just like there's so much to keep track of. It's no wonder that this magic like technology is not really available to the general public. Like all of time would be a disaster.
So they eventually get to Hagrid's hut, and they see themselves take off the cloak in front of Hagrid. And Harry goes, "This is the weirdest thing we've ever done," which
says a lot.
That says a lot, and it's probably accurate.
Yeah.
So anyway, they watch the conversation happening, being careful to listen for certain cues so they know exactly where they're at.
Like
in
the
timeline.
milk jug breaking, finding Scabbers in a second.
Yes.
Scream.
So then you get the group heading down to perform the actual execution. And Hermione notes that they need to wait until they see Buckbeak.
Which is really smart.
Well, Harry's all gung-ho about like, well, I could just do this now. And Hermione's like, no.
Right.
Then they could assume that Hagrid
right.
let them loose. And Hagrid would be in trouble. So
there's such a small window of time that they could actually
very
succeed
small.
in it.
And anyway, so they end up accomplishing this. And they bring Buckbeak somewhat reluctantly into the forest. And they all come out, and McNair is upset because he was the one that spotted Buckbeak when they were walking in or out the window. And he's like, I can't believe he's gone. He was right here. He was tied up. And then they go into this long explanation of like, well, we could search the grounds, we could search the forest, or, Dumbledore comes in. And like, well, why don't you search the skies? The thing can fly. So
right. Which this whole bit, I had a new reading this time around with it.
Okay.
Which now I'm looking at some other details. I'm going to tweak it a little bit from my original notes that I wrote down. I think that Dumbledore saw them outside the window while he was inside Hagrid's hut. You have to follow me down the rabbit hole, as you will, okay? So I think that if Dumbledore saw Harry and Hermione outside trying to free Buckbeak, immediately there's going to be a whole bunch of thoughts just going through his brain of, it's late, as we've already said, it's 9:55, they're out of bounds. That's not necessarily too out of character for them, not for Harry, but they're doing something illegal with trying to free Buckbeak, and Hermione is not going to do something illegal, especially with the Minister of Magic like mere feet away. So I think Dumbledore would see that and recognize like, that's weird and out of character and potentially something that I should be paying attention to. It's like a quick little thought that I'm going to put aside in my brain and come back to when I can process it. I think he also gets the enjoyment out of seeing like the good karma, the good justice of Buckbeak did not deserve to be executed. So if he can be freed, by all means, let it happen. But I think that him seeing them freeing Buckbeak would make him definitely draw McNair's attention back to the document that he was supposed to sign, because I think he was just so focused on, like, I get to kill something, that he just overlooked it. And I think by drawing his attention back to the document, that is the thing that gives them the time, obviously. But I think that's also why he said, when they came out, he said it, how extraordinary, in the note of amusement. I think the amusement isn't so much because he's believing that, like, a hippogriff was able to escape freely. I think it's the amusement of knowing that Harry and Hermione and Buckbeak are literally just beyond the bushes over there. And I know they walked away because I saw them do it.
I agree and I disagree. I agree. Dumbledore clearly has a grand design here.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm disagreeing on specifics. I would say I think he's made up he knows Hermione has a time turner.
Mm-hmm.
I'd assume he'd have to somewhat approve.
Right.
Whatever.
Right.
Or help vouch. Whatever.
For her to get it. Which is why I think he sees this and is like, time travel is happening right now. I should take note of that.
See, that's the point where I disagree with. I think he could have planned, hey, I'm going to use this time turner thing to my advantage. Mm-hmm. Here's what I want to have happen. Mm-hmm. So I think he decided that prior to.
I think it's...
And then if you're right, if you're right, and that he saw them out the window or whatever, and that played into his amusement, he knows his plan worked.
Okay, so going with that, right? Like, we know he distracted Hagrid by saying, like, I need a drink, which I feel like is slightly out of character for him. Maybe not too much so, but I feel like it, as an impressive man, it takes a lot to really throw him off his game. So the idea of, like, a hippogriff just escaping is not going to be enough for him to be like, oh, I need a drink, I think it's just, I know I need to put Hagrid back in his hut so that Buckbeak doesn't, like, reveal himself and then get Hagrid in trouble, because Harry and Hermione would obviously be, like, part of the scheme or whatever. So by distracting them, he knows that gives Harry and Hermione the time to get away. And I think he sees it happening, and it's just like that thought that I put to the side. And it's not until later, when things have come full circle and he realizes, oh, I'm the one who told them to go back in time, that like closes his time loop and avoids a time paradox.
Let us know, folks. Elizabeth and I agree that Dumbledore is up to some shenanigans.
He just always is.
Let us know if it was pre-planned or if he just winged it and went with it as it happened.
I just feel like it's. I've always loved this time travel story the most out of any time travel story, and I've never really been able to pinpoint why it works so well for me. And I think it's just because it so perfectly avoids the time paradox. Like most stories, it's, people go back in time to fix something that went wrong, somebody's death or whatever the case may be, usually death. But most of the time that time travel doesn't work because you time traveled to fix the thing that made you time travel. It's a paradox. Whereas with this, it's, Dumbledore witnessed the time travel before he ordered the time travel. And because Harry and Hermione don't know what they're going back in time to fix exactly, I think that's the only reason why this is able to succeed.
Once again, I both agree and disagree. I agree to your Harry and Hermione not knowing exactly what they were doing probably led more to their success.
Right.
I still disagree on the Dumbledore bit. Fair enough. So, anyway, we are running a little long. So, we're going to get to the rest of this time turner thing because there's a lot to it still. They end up having to essentially camp out for a couple of hours as the whole Shrieking Shack scene
is playing out.
Just
watching from afar.
They do notice some interesting things, though. Right after they go into the Shrieking Shack, Dumbledore and the crew from the Ministry
Right.
pass right by where they just were.
Right.
Which is a very, like, nick of time kind of moment.
And it shows you how time travel and like fate and stuff, it's like with Trelawney, like, predicting the future, like, so many things have to specifically happen the way they did. Mere seconds can change everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So they finally witness the whole Shrieking Shack moment, which Harry tries time and time again. Well, the cloak is out there. If I don't get the cloak, then Snape can't sneak up and ruin this whole thing.
Right.
Hermione's like, no, you idiot, stop. Well,
which he has to say so many times.
Well, Pettigrew's right there. I could just grab him really quick. No, you idiot, stop. Like, I get it, but you can't do that.
Right.
So...
To be fair, he didn't get the crash course of, like, time travel rules the way she got from McGonagall.
I do understand his impulsiveness.
Yeah.
Like, to be so close, and you know what's going to happen. Well, you know most of what's going to happen. You don't know. You don't know that Dumbledore and the crew is showing up right then.
Right.
You don't know that Hagrid is drunkily walking back to the castle. You don't know those parts because you weren't privy to those originally. So, hence Hermione being like, no, you can't do this. We don't know everything that's going on.
I mean, she brings up that good question of, I mean, the what if, right? Like, had they seen, Sirius and all of that, like, yeah, they would have ordered for the Dementors to come and just give him the kiss, and then what would have happened? Like, again, mere seconds can change the fate of everything.
Sure. Eventually, we get Hermione and Harry go back to Hagrid's hut because they realize that once Lupin transforms into a werewolf, he's going to be coming right towards them.
And we can still get hurt in the past.
Absolutely.
Because this is now our present time.
Correct. So they go back to Hagrid's hut, and they kind of hide out there for a little bit.
I like Buckbeak settling down for a nap.
Yeah. But Harry wants to see how the Dementor scene at the edge of the lake plays out. Mm-hmm. So he leaves the hut and goes to see how this happens, and he's waiting and he's waiting and he's waiting. What he thinks is going to happen, because he thinks the familiar shadowy figure he saw on the other side of the lake resembles his dad. So he believes that his dad is going to appear. Right. He's not sure how, because it makes zero sense given everything he's heard.
Well, especially his knowledge about ghosts, right? I mean, nearly Headless Nick and everybody else has been floating around the castle. He's never seen James Potter floating around.
So contrary to everything that he logically knows, he truly believes his dad will appear and conjure the Patronus. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen. Then he's finally like, oh, wait, I look like my dad. This was me. Right. I'm supposed to do this. And he steps up, and you get that, sorry, spoiler alert for our intro, but you get the Expecto Patronum sound. And
it's the most powerful Patronus he has cast so far.
Yes.
Which I
full
think
corporeal Patronus.
Just the thought of James is what allowed him to produce it, which is so, like, oh, it makes me want to cry. That
and the knowledge of him being able to do it, I think always helps. Like, when you know you can do it, you automatically get a little bit better.
And to be fair, there aren't any Dementors near him. But still,
also true. Producing
with the happy memory of his dad and just that love, that, like, gush of it, I think it's, it's very similar to, like, Lily's love of him. Well,
before we get to the ooey gooey nature of the loving, the loving aspect, I just wanted to point out such Britishness in this book where the word quieten was used, which apparently is just a British word meaning to quiet.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. Moving on. So as we know, the Patronus canters back to its to the producer of the charm, and Harry sees that figure try to pat it on the head. Mm-hmm. Well, this happens. The large stag comes back to Harry, and he just says the word prongs. Yeah. And goes to touch the Patronus, but as he does, it vanishes.
It's just such a powerful moment.
It's a great moment. It's a very great moment. And then, because he has to get snapped out of that moment, because he still has a second person to save.
Right. You got to remember the numbers of the windows and whatnot.
Exactly. So he has to get Hermione up on this hippogriff, which he is not all about. and they have to then fly to the 7th floor and the 13th window from the right, Flitwick's office, which is interesting. Do you think...
And again, sorry, this whole time, they have to remember, too, like, I mean, Buckbeak is a hippogriff. They have to bow to him. They have to be showing the respect to him. At any point, Buckbeak could just be like, nah, I'm not doing this. And he's massive. They wouldn't have the power to move him if he decided not to go along with it.
Well, it's also a creature and not a broom or something. So they mentioned it's bobbing up and down this entire time.
Right.
So do you think with Sirius being... This is an aside, I'm sorry. Do you think with Sirius being in Flitwick's office specifically, Flitwick put some...
on his windows?
Well, clearly not the windows, because they open it fairly easily enough. But to their credit, I mean, it's the 7th floor. Like, how many... It's hard to get to, and it's hard to get out of. And Sirius doesn't have a wand. So I'm assuming he put enchantments on the room itself and the door to the room.
Probably.
But he probably left the window unaccounted for because why would you need to necessarily barricade? Like, he's not going to jump out the window, probably.
Right.
So, anyway. And they conventionally locked it. So, I mean, whatever.
I just love imagining from Sirius's perspective of just like, you know, I'm sitting in this room preparing to die, or at least not, you know, actual death, but being kissed. And then it's just like, oh, there he is outside my window. It's like the same way Harry felt when Ron was outside his window in Chamber of Secrets.
That's probably
like,
a very...
like, where did you come from and how are you here?
No, that's probably a very good comparison of like, what is going on right now?
Right.
This I did not have on my bingo card of how this night was going to go.
He doesn't have time to explain it either. It's just like, go, just get out of here, survive.
Yeah, and him clamoring, first of all, the window does not sound very large. It sounds
not at all.
Relatively thin, which is probably another reason why they're like, who's going to break out of this thing? But he gets his arms in it. Now, again, put yourself into Sirius's mindset here. I get that what you have waiting for you is worse than whatever can possibly happen to you in the next preceding moments.
But you're trying to clamber onto the back of a hippogriff on the
7th floor. That's bobbing up and down, and you're coming head and shoulders first out of this window.
And there's already people on it.
This is not easy and terrifying.
No.
I'm just saying.
I suppose the adrenaline rush is making him be extra agile.
But anyway, they fly up to the top of, I believe, the West Tower, or one of the towers.
West Tower.
West Tower. And they do this exchange, and Sirius wants to have a moment, and they're like, just go.
There is no time for moments right now.
Go.
Which I love the no time for moments, because I feel like in movies and stuff, there's always like, let's have the moment. It's like, no, literally, you're going to die. Get out of here as quickly as possible.
I do want to bring that up in the spoiler section.
Okay.
But,
should we just get to the spoilers?
We should, because we are running crazy long, which is something we always say here, so we apologize.
To be fair, this is a very, very long chapter. It's just so good. It's just so good.
We hope you've stuck with us and you've enjoyed what we've discussed so far. We have a lot of Snape coming up. We have some serious stuff coming up.
Some Time Turner discussion.
And maybe a random deep dive. We'll see if we have time for that from me. So
come back.
We will be right back with the spoiler section.
You foul, loathsome, evil little cockroach!
All right, we are back with the spoiler section. And we wanted to start out with some Snape stuff. Elizabeth, you had a point.
Your conversation with Molly the other day when you were talking about how Snape, like, he sees himself as a hero. And all of the points that you brought up, I loved. I was like, yeah, I agree 100%. But I really thought you were going to go...
Thank you.
I thought you were going to go further, though. Because when you guys were talking, I just started thinking about how... in Snape's mind, you know, Sirius is the person who led to the death of Lily. And, I mean, obviously, of course, Voldemort is the most to blame for her death. But in his mind, it's Sirius who betrayed them, who, led Voldemort to them and allowed the love of his life to be killed. Since, you know, it's a lot easier to blame Sirius than it is to blame himself for sharing the prophecy in the first place. So I just thought, like, you know, his anger is so intense. He's lost his cool so many times in these past few chapters, and which is out of character for him. And I was just thinking, you know, it's because he can finally maybe bring some justice to Lily, and he's robbed of that chance.
I definitely agree. I think Lily dying definitely registers with Snape. 100%. I completely agree with that. Yeah, let's just toss it on the list of reasons he thought he was heroic.
Yeah.
Which is not to say... It's not like he was being a false hero. That's not what we're saying here.
No.
It's just that...
Well, I mean, every great villain sees themselves as the hero of their own story. Not that I'm saying he's a villain.
I was going to say that...
He's doing the right thing here.
I think he believes he's doing the right thing, and like 99% of onlookers would agree that he is doing the correct thing. It's just you need to know the exact specific details that Pettigrew actually does exist.
Right.
Still, that throws everything into question. But Snape doesn't know that.
Right.
So, but yes, throw the Lily thing onto the immense stack of reasons why Snape feels like he's 100% valid in feeling the way he does and acting the way he does.
And deserves the Order of Merlin.
Which I believe he does not get.
No, he doesn't get it.
Because he doesn't end up getting it because Sirius ends up escaping.
Right, and add that to the long, long list of why he has a grudge against him.
That's fair. Although I'm not sure, I don't think it's ever explicitly said if he earns one posthumously for his work as a double agent.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'd assume that he does ultimately earn it. Whether you like that or not, that's whatever. That's a whole other argument.
At very least, I mean, he gets a child named after him. Whether or not he would have approved of that or enjoyed that is debatable.
Fair enough as well. But I think those surviving that knew of his double agent status would probably have vouched for him getting it. So I'm assuming he got one posthumously for it. But
yeah, I will say, going off of that a little bit, but just spurring my train of thought. This is another one of those things where plot points later on in other books, if applied here, could have easily fixed and avoided everything. Like, okay, yes, we have the 13-year-olds who no one wants to believe, and the werewolf who no one wants to believe, and a murderer who no one wants to believe. That's all fine and dandy, except we're forgetting the fact that we have magic, which can be used to, like, check stories. Like, we have you can check the wands to see what the reverse spells were that they used. We have, the potion that can make you tell the truth. You can even pull the memories and stick them in the pensieve and be like, let's all watch what happened, literally from your memory. Like, there are things they could have done, and the past 13 years could have been avoided if Barty Crouch had just not held Sirius without trial. If he had taken the time to check the facts, because we have magic to do so, everything could be avoided.
So, to those points, I'll take them from easiest to most difficult to get around. The memory thing, we've seen that you can alter your memories.
Yes, but it becomes fuzzy. It becomes very clear.
You might know that something's not right with it, but that doesn't mean you can figure out what that actually is.
Well, I guess you could at least see, like...
You could assume.
You could at least see that it's been altered, so you would know what you're seeing is not true.
Yes, but you can't assume and fill in the blanks.
Right.
So that's the trick to get around that. I'm assuming, I don't know this for a fact, but I would assume highly advanced wizards that know they're going to come into contact with predicaments. I don't know if you can or not train yourself with Veritaserum a little bit. And I don't know if there's a resistance to it, or they can take a potion, or they can charm a way to get around it. I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, that'd be something that'd be interesting to look into, because I've always took it as like, look, this is...
It's a definitive thing?
Yes, like, it's going to make you tell the truth regardless of what you want.
And that might actually be true. I'm just throwing a potential...
I guess the loophole against that would be like, it's hard to come by, and it's a very, very complicated potion, so the chances of having it, maybe not. Though I would assume like the ministry would have some on.
I agree with that.
On file.
Now, as far as the wand goes, that's more tricky. And I don't know how you would at least I can't think of right now as we're talking about this, how you kind of would get around it or why you wouldn't check it. Mm-hmm. I think...
Because, I mean, they could have checked Peter's wand and seen that he had used the curse.
You know what? I retract everything I just said. We're talking about the Ministry of Magic.
So you should be checking these things.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If you go back to my deep dive from Lupin and his father, Lyle, wanting to just hold Fenrir Greyback for 24 hours in a cell until the moon changes.
Which is very interesting, by the way. I never read any of that stuff, so that was cool.
Yeah, thank you. So he just wanted to hold him for 24 hours until the moon changes and we can definitively tell if he is or is not a werewolf. And they wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So if they're not doing that, when they have a multitude of witnesses pointing to one thing...
I agree with your point. They are incompetent and should be better.
Yes, okay. There we go. Really quick, and I know we want to talk about this in our end of Prisoner of Azkaban wrap-up a little bit, but I'm going to kind of preemptively get to that. I know Anna will want to talk about it. Hopefully we'll have her on for the final episode. But I did want to mention the Sirius wanting to have a moment at the end, but having to fly off. And the differences between the book and the movie here.
Oh, yeah, please enlighten me, because I do not remember the movie.
So,
it's been a long time.
Reading this book, and again, Anna and I will have this conversation, and it'll probably get a little bit more heated than this, but I'm going to say a very inflammatory thing right now.
Okay.
For the most part, I feel like this book is aggressively accurate when transferred to the movie. Like, literally, word for word lines sometimes go straight from the pages of the book to those characters saying them.
Well, that's how I wish the whole movie
That's
series
fair.
was.
I will say this, though. There are two instances where the book aggressively diverts from the movie, or the movie diverts from the book.
Okay.
And one is in the Shrieking Shack, and that is the scene that most Harry Potter book fans are most aggressively against. The thing that they cut out from the book scene is essentially most of Lupin's monologue about the Marauders and, you know, them and how they've affected him and all of that.
Well, that's a shame, because
they
so
cut
much
out
of
a lot
this
of
chapter is just like, you know, before Marauders and how they interact with Harry.
They do cut out a lot of that from Lupin, which gives a lot of background. It gives a lot of background to James specifically that is left behind. So I will give you all of that. That's very, very true. They seem to supplant it by giving Sirius that scene at the end that they cut here in the book. So in the book, they're like, no, get out of here. Just go.
Do they have him linger in the movie?
They have him linger in the movie in in a courtyard area. And it's because you have... I know why they have it. It's because you have Gary Oldman, who is a treasure.
Right.
I will hear nothing against Gary Oldman as an actor. Because that's just wrong. But you have Gary Oldman. You're going to give Gary Oldman something to say. Of value. So, you know, he has that line to Harry about, you know, wanting to stay with me and whatever. And it's a wonderful moment. And that happens in the book. But when they're about to leave, Sirius has this little monologue that he gives to Harry. And it's a beautiful monologue, and it is a really nice sentiment. It's a nice scene. It doesn't happen in the books.
Well, because logically he needs to escape or else he'll die.
Other people have said that it also doesn't necessarily fit Sirius's character. You could debate back and forth on that, which I'm sure we will. But those are the two big differences that I have noticed after reading the book. Does
the movie show him more as like book 4 Sirius than book 3 one? Because I feel like book 3 Sirius is like, he's an escaped convict. He's like still kind of up there and it's like...
I think he does have a soft spot for Harry though.
Well, yeah, it's developing, certainly. And I mean, he's escaped from prison to protect Harry.
And I think, Sirius obviously saw Harry as a baby. And Sirius has spent this entire year watching him, and watching him play Quidditch, and watching him develop as a wizard, and being like... Yeah,
but even then, it can still be awkward to finally meet someone.
No, that's true, yes.
So, does the movie make it seem like they've had this relationship for a long time?
No, I think Gary Oldman plays it very well in that... I think that scene where he's talking to Harry right after they get out of the Whomping Willow, I think that comes off as very genuine.
Okay.
very much like the scene in the book, to me. It's this scene at the end that I think people take most issue with. Because A, it doesn't exist in the book, and B, it, quote-unquote, doesn't fit his character.
I suppose at some point...
But if you're going off this... Sorry. But if you're going off the scene of him exiting the Whomping Willow, that's a caring, softer Sirius, which is what we see for the first time.
Well, especially because it's, you know, Harry just said he wants to live with Sirius, and he's just like, really?
Yeah.
Aw.
Right.
Sweet.
It's a softer side of Sirius that you see right out the gate, which does happen in the book. But anyway,
Right.
I digress.
No, maybe at some point you can force me to watch the movies again, and I'll have my thoughts.
We'll talk more about it. We'll talk more about the Marauders map in the next and final chapter. Hopefully we'll have Anna on for it, because I'm sure she's going to have a lot of issues with what I just said. So, anyway, we're going to have a fun little mini segment here to wrap it up.
I want to talk about the portraits.
All right.
They fascinate me.
This is my deep dive on Hogwarts portraits.
Okay.
All right, and I actually have my notes with me. So, this is actually pretty interesting.
Okay.
The degree to which they interact with people looking upon them depends on the power of the witch or wizard painted.
So not the painter, but the person
No,
painted.
the witch or wizard that is painted.
Interesting.
For example, you have the headmasters and headmistresses in the headmaster's office.
Who are very, very active.
Correct. You also have Sir Cadogan.
Yeah, he's fairly active.
Active, but not exactly the most feedback you're ever getting from somebody.
Right.
You want to fight, whatever.
Right.
So specifically...
That makes me wonder about the fat lady. Who is she in real life then?
Well, I have some things here. So, essentially, the enchantments that are used upon them are to ensure the painting movement. So they have enchantments placed on them to ensure the movement of the painting. So we've hinted at maybe, is the paint being used or a potion or something like that, but it's enchantments.
Okay.
So, they use some of the depicted's favorite phrases and imitate demeanor. Okay? So, the painter interpreted Sir Cadogan as a forever challenging and unbalanced, which is how the painter saw him. That's how he's painted.
Okay.
Okay? So that's some of the phrases and demeanor and stuff that the painters put into this.
Okay.
The fat lady is similar. Essentially, this is JK's description, not mine.
She gets drunk fairly frequently, and
She's a two-dimensional type of character, not very deep. And that's all we really see of the fat lady, is kind of a two-dimensional character, not very in depth.
all right.
So, headmasters, however, are painted before death,
Interesting.
and they teach themselves. Okay? So, let's take Dumbledore. His portrait was painted before he died.
Which makes sense since he knew he was going to get killed.
Correct. So Dumbledore, then, is literally teaching his own portrait how to act and behave like them, their real counterpart, including imparting useful memories and knowledge that can be shared through centuries.
That's cool.
If you're a headmaster and a headmistress, and you're a considerable witch or wizard,
Yeah.
you would want your knowledge
Yeah.
and your experiences to come throughout the ages.
I feel like I've always wondered, what does Dumbledore do during the day? And I know he's talking to himself in
Literally.
portrait form.
Quite literally. Which also makes sense for all of our questions about Gilderoy Lockhart and his 1.5 million portraits.
Well, were they portraits or were they just photographs?
I think it's all of the above.
Probably. It's probably any...
I mean, the photographs are like him in a magazine or a newspaper.
Right.
The ones of him, with his locks or whatever in curls.
Well, that makes me wonder, if, for example, if someone decided to paint a portrait of James and Lily, would that even be possible since so much time has passed and they wouldn't be able to be their true selves since it's it's painted not with I see the person right there. It's just a painted from memory or from a picture or something like that.
You could paint them and you could paint them in the context of your impression of them, which would come through, like Sir Cadogan and like the fat lady. But they wouldn't obviously be able to impart literally parts of themselves upon it. That's the difference.
Because, yeah, I've always wondered that, or, like, why Harry doesn't try to get a portrait of Sirius.
But
know?
That's also why important witches and wizards have multiple, and they can, and they can.
So then I wonder if we have to. Like, I know portraits can move amongst their portraits, but usually it's just like there's the one figure moving amongst multiple. So when someone paints an extra portrait of somebody, is it just like a blank canvas and you're like, okay, you can be on this? Or do they paint the wizard and it just like becomes part of the other paintings? You know what I mean?
The impression I get is it's a combination of things that really make the magic of it work. Mm-hmm. It's like magic of the painter, magic of the painted, and then the actual person who it's of. It's like it's a complicated bit of magic, but it's really kind of cool, So that was the Hogwarts portrait deep dive.
I feel like someone at some point in Harry's adult life is like, let me paint a portrait of you. And he's like, nah, I'm good.
Or, well, because I'm sure because he enters an important position where he has to get his portrait painted. And then he's asked to impart his wisdoms on it. And he's like,
I have done so much my entire life. I don't need this as my legacy. Just let me live my life. My portrait can just smile and wave. How about that? Point to my scar every now and then.
And with Harry awkwardly being painted, we will end this episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. This was obviously a very large chapter, so thanks for sticking with us. Also, remember to check out that restricted section
I'm
episode.
Excited to listen.
It's chapter 3, the Advanced Guard, which is a really cool chapter. Obviously, there's a spoiler section. We meet Tonks. Yes.
I love Tonks.
So I'm really excited to talk about it and let us know what you think. So check out the Restricted Section podcast.
And come back next week because we're going to finish the book.
And we're going to come back and finish the book.
Yay.
That's right. So big stuff. We got Goblet of Fire. We got some new exciting things to debut in Goblet of Fire. So stick with us. Things are being really cool. So stick with us and hang out and let us know what you think on Twitter and Instagram. Have a good one. Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hogwarts a Pod.